funny how we keep dancing.
I'll tell you how I really feel.
Right there.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, I think, first of all, that part of the problem with the current books that we've named rightly, in bad form perhaps, or they've been written, is that they're derivative.
Yeah.
You know, they're derivative.
Right.
They haven't drawn on source material. And that's why those ideas are inbred. That's why they read the way that they do. But I'd also like to say that from this is sort of a different strain, from a Jungian perspective, or an archetypal perspective, the appeal of the vampire is talking about a being that is androgynous, beautiful, immortal. These are metaphors for the soul. Like if we look at elves in Tolkien, or angels,
right.
These are all, you'll find that they all share, and vampires, when done well, they all share that same kind of context, right? And these are again, from the Jungian or archetypal perspective, we're projecting what we see inside of our soul, if you will. And I don't mean that in dogmatic terms, so please don't think.
Yeah, no, but the.
I mean from a mythic perspective, or I think you understand.
Yeah, oh no, I completely. And actually, the really nifty thing is if you dig back into elves and back into all of it goes back. Lady Wilde, I got a wild hair on my ass to do a whole bunch of fairy research over the summer, and I ended up chewing through Oscar Wilde's mother's book on Irish legends and things, and her whole presentation, the whole core of her idea of specifically like the Tuatha De Danann and the Shay. So I'm talking like the fairies who are really the Tolkien elves, like they are the kissing cousins of Legolas. She connects them to the Watcher Angels, the Nephilim. And if you go far enough back into that literature, the first place that I can find, folklorically speaking, beings who look human and are yet otherworldly, and who also is the Book of Enoch. And their main sin is clearly stated in the book where they drank blood.
Yeah, you'll find them in Sumerian mythology.
And all of that stuff digs on back and digs on back, and it's just,
right?
yeah.
It's probably been around as long as we've had human beings.
Yeah, it's fascinating to just keep going back. Yeah.
And every culture has a vampire myth.
Well, because like Sumerian Ardat Lily, she's kind of like the Leon and Shay, where the Leon and Shay is the fairy girlfriend who comes and visits you and sucks the life out of you, and you live a brief but brilliant life as a very inspired poet or artist. The Ardat Lily in Sumerian culture was a woman who died before she could have sex. And she is forever visiting young men in the bedroom and coming on to them kind of like succubus, but because she's this otherworldly creature, she destroys them. She sucks the life out of them, and she has become a demon by her transformation.
You'll find the same thing actually also in Tibet, and like you go a little bit further east with the Dakinis and Kali. It's also in Iranian mythology. So you follow that whole, it's like continuum, right?
Yeah, there's
well,
yeah,
that's
we could probably do a whole thing with this.
The colonies in between, they're all kind of interconnected. It's like a continuum, right? It kind of goes back.
And on a side note, to bring it back to Anne Rice, when Anne had done her origin story for the vampires and tied it to Egypt, I saw a whole lot of academic, no, there's nothing vampiric in Egypt, nothing vampiric in Egypt. If you have read the Book of Going Forth by Day, which is better known as the Book of the Dead, which is actually a collection of several things: the coffin texts, the pyramid texts, and then the various and sundry scrolls in later periods that are collected as the Book of the Dead. There are a number of otherworldly beings that haunt the netherworld, sometimes called the Duat, and they are Amit, which is devourers. And all of them have very colorful names, like he who walks with his face turned backwards, he who eats what the dead abominate, and there are several that specifically drink blood. So
I think every culture, predating the whole Nephilim Christianity aspect, like you mentioned, I find it very interesting that the fallen angel, or demonic, goes back to Babylon and Sumerian culture, where we get the Lilith character came from a Sumerian wind demon. Yep. And she's the mother of all dark creatures to a lot of authors. So it's like we're just pulling aspects of history and religion and mythology and weaving it together. That's where we get the vampire today, as far as I know.
okay, so we've strayed.
Started in Latin America, because you would think about like the Mayans, they worship blood. blood was the life to them, and you had the vampire bat, and they made sacrifices. So one might argue that the whole vampire mythology can actually originate all into the minds. And like, I'm surprised there hasn't been more mythology written about it, because they all suddenly disappeared. And
Does anyone have a question that's specifically linked to Anne Rice's work? Right there.
I would like to talk more about why some vampires are more scarier than others, and I think it's why they're vampires, because in the books that shall not be named, the point of the books is not a moral question of it can kill people if it's okay, you need to, is it alright? It's not a moral question about what makes a human. It's a story about, hey, don't have sex till you get married.
Well, you know, Rice didn't shy away from sexuality and morality because her background, you know, San Francisco during the 70s and the gay movement, I mean, we could theorize that Louis Lestat and Claudia was the first, you know, gay couple adopting a child. You know, she predated what's going on in today's society, you know, 20, 30 years ago.
It's true.
There is, okay, so one of the things, and it is not the, not every scholar on vampires agrees with this interpretation, but as the vampire moved into fiction and literature, there is, in my opinion, an inescapably sexual element, even with the monstrous ones. And what I would argue is the defining line for what makes it, what makes the vampire either a monster or a relatable, more human character is how that sexuality, which is expressed orally through feeding. I mean, really, there is no getting around the, okay, so the vampire sees their prey, the fangs get long and hard, doesn't take a whole, you know, a lot of rocket science to see what kind of a comparison is going on there. There's penetration. If you're not careful, sometimes you make baby vampires when the penetration happens. Okay, so moving all of that aside, you have the monstrous vampires are the sort where it is more about rape, where it is more about preying upon people for this thing that drives them on that core level. Where Anne Rice, there is definitely an aspect to her literature that is, she's telling some stories about gay love. It's not, there's really no, oh God, in the late 70s and early 80s, there was a proliferation of vampire literature that was specifically and explicitly tied not just to the gay subculture, but also to AIDS. And since the blood was the transmitting thing there, the vampire in that time period, for many writers, became a way of telling that story. And now you see it, again, taking those different aspects and retelling where it hits us in the back of our head, with this strange fluid exchange between this being that is driven by a hunger, which is described as something that is tantamount to lust. And a lot of the stories for the vampires is about self-control. You want to go there and then there?
Yeah.
You mentioned, and it just occurred to me listening to you, that the times that the Vampire Chronicles were written, and I found myself wondering if that was part of the problem with why our monsters are no longer monsters, is because at the time, in Anne Rice's novels, we see this, where the vampires force themselves on persons. In her witches books, the witches, that ghost forced himself. There was always that matter of force, and as the times change, and usually the victims were women.
Yeah.
But as times change and the equal rights era has passed us, we no longer want to see ourselves as victims.
Yes.
And so as a result, our monsters can't be monsters because we can't be victims. And when you marry that to now that all of our monster literature is now visual literature in film and television, which especially in the United States, they cannot be not pretty. So we have so many things all coming together, and as a result, we now have human beings with an issue rather than a monster.
Nina Auerbach has a book called Our Vampires Ourselves, and she kind of like looks at the different time period where somebody uses the vampire as an archetype to tell a story and how it reflects that particular time period, the things that concern that time period. I think that we can't ignore the fact that Anne Rice also wrote books on BDSM. At the time during which she was writing these things, it was very difficult in mainstream literature to present a relationship where pain and pleasure are intertwined in a way that was not transgressive and in many ways against the rules. So for the woman or for the victim to submit, it had to be, you see it with Dracula. You know, these ladies, they really want to get with the foreign count, but he has to overcome them with his great charisma. And some of the interesting writing about Stoker's Dracula is you're looking at a character who is a representation of the staid British fear of foreign people coming in and stealing their women. And so you see this, and Laurel, she takes it, and she's just like, nope, there's a lot of sex going on here, and hey, guess what? We're just going to put that right out there and not make it a big deal anymore. And I do think that there's a lot to do with the fact that we've had a lot of changing boundaries for a creature that in a lot of ways exists beyond those bounds and pushes those boundaries of what defines male and female, because everybody's got blood, so a vampire doesn't give a shit.
I see a parallel here between Marilyn Manson and the vampire in a way. And that may sound really...
Bowie first.
Okay. Well, you know, I'm making a point here. But when someone like Manson starts out, they're shocking, they're horrifying, everybody's protesting and boycotting him. But even he can't do anything to shock people anymore. Society has become so accepting or jaded. What's left? What does the next wave of vampire authors, what can they do to not be sanitized, to shock and scare people?
Which is perhaps why there was a bit of a skew toward zombies as opposed to vampires.
Yeah. I think we're out of ideas almost for the moment.
Yeah.
I wanted to hear your thoughts on the Tale of the Body Thief, because that was like a different note, and where I always loved Lestat, but I remember reading that in middle school, and that is like where he was taking me again through what it was like to be human, and that's when I really felt for him, desperately the other, trying to be part of society and stumbling and like.
Well, yeah, because he still couldn't manage it. He had been alien on for so long that I think having a human experience led him realize that it didn't have so much to do with what he was physically. It had everything to do with what he was here, and that is, for me, like the real power of that particular book. Also, I really kind of liked the idea of like the possessor. Like, how scary is that? Like, that is a terrifying monster where it's just like, and now I'm over here.
Which book are you talking about?
Tale of the Body Thief.
And one of the last good ones for a while, because I really hated
there were a couple that I'm like...
The Passion of the Christ vampire, was it?
Yeah, I simply, there are a couple that I'm just like, nope, not reading, sorry.
The beginning was awesome, and I liked, you know, how she presented Memnoch, and then all of a sudden it became Passion of the Christ with Lestat thrown in. And it's like, oh, really? I wasted hours reading this.
I think one of the things that people find, and I find that Memnoch is a very divisive book with Anne's fans, and I think the reason why is because a lot of people like the shades of gray of the mythology. They like being able to not have the morality so spelled out, and to have it defined that there is a devil that exists in her cosmology, and it's not even a theory anymore, stripped away things. And what I hear about Prince Lestat is that she said in interviews that it's going to be taking the Chronicles and sort of doing a soft reboot in the sense that she's kind of writing Memnoch out of continuity.
Okay.